Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison pressed his face against the muddy riverbank, his heart hammering against his tactical vest. The sound of gunfire echoed across the water, but something was wrong. Dead wrong. "Contact left! Contact left!" Petty Officer Rodriguez whispered into his comm. But his voice carried confusion rather than the sharp clarity of a soldier who had eyes on target. Harrison raised his head slightly, scanning the opposite shore through his scope. The mission had been simple enough: infiltrate the Krillian forward operating base, gather intelligence on their new plasma weapons, and extract before dawn. But now, 3 hours into what should have been a quiet reconnaissance, someone was picking off Krillian sentries one by one. The problem was it wasn't them doing the shooting. "Boss, you seeing this?" Staff Sergeant Williams crawled up beside Harrison, his own rifle trained on the alien compound. "That's the 4th Krill down in 10 minutes, and I haven't fired a single round." Harrison's team of 12 Navy SEALs had been observing the base for the past hour, waiting for the perfect moment to move in. The Krillians were a newer species to the galactic stage, tall insectoid creatures with natural armor plating and a nasty habit of expanding their territory into human space. Intelligence suggested they were testing advanced energy weapons here, weapons that could tip the balance in the ongoing border conflicts. "Anyone got eyes on the shooter?" Harrison whispered into his comm. A chorus of negative responses came back from his scattered team. They were positioned in a wide arc around the base, each man with perfect lines of sight to different sections. If there was a sniper operating in their area, someone should have spotted him. Another sharp crack echoed across the water, and this time Harrison saw the muzzle flash. It came from directly across the river, maybe 200 meters upstream from their position, but that was impossible. Petty Officer Chen was positioned exactly there, and he hadn't reported any movement. "Chen, report!" Harrison hissed into his radio. "Still in position, Commander. No movement detected, but—" Chen's voice carried the same confused tone they'd all been hearing. "Sir, that shot came from maybe 20 feet to my left. I'm looking at that exact spot right now, and there's nothing there but river water." Harrison felt ice forming in his stomach. In 15 years of special operations, he'd seen a lot of strange things, but shooters who could make themselves invisible while picking off targets with surgical precision? That was new. The Krillian base was in chaos now. The insectoid soldiers were scurrying behind cover, their mandibles clicking in agitated communication. Their natural night vision was better than human eyesight, but even they couldn't locate the source of the gunfire. "Williams Rodriguez with me. We're moving upstream to investigate. Rest of the team, maintain overwatch and keep tracking those alien positions." Harrison low-crawled along the muddy bank, his 2 men following close behind. The river was shallow here, maybe 4 feet deep, flowing slowly between banks lined with thick vegetation. Perfect cover for an ambush, but they'd checked this entire area twice before setting up their observation post. As they moved closer to Chen's position, Harrison caught something that made him freeze, a glint in the water just for a split second, like light reflecting off glass or metal. But when he looked directly at the spot, there was nothing there. "Chen, you copy? We're coming up on your 6. "Roger that, sir. Still nothing visible from my position." Harrison was within 50 meters of Chen when the next shot rang out. This time, he was watching the exact spot where the muzzle flash originated. The shot came from the middle of the river, where the water was maybe 3 feet deep. But there was still nothing there. "What the hell?" Rodriguez muttered, and Harrison had to agree with the sentiment. The shot had been perfect. Another Krillian sentry down with what looked like a headshot from over 300 meters, but the shooter was either completely invisible or firing from underwater. Neither option made much sense. "Commander, this is Mitchell." The voice of his communications specialist crackled in his earpiece. "I'm picking up some weird electromagnetic signatures from that area, not standard human or Krillian tech." Harrison's mind raced. First contact protocols were clear. Any unknown technology or potential alien presence had to be reported immediately. But they were deep in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies, and their extraction window was closing fast. Another shot. Another dead Krillian. This time, Harrison was ready. He had his rifle trained on the water where the muzzle flash appeared, and he finally saw something that made his blood run cold. For just a moment, as the shot was fired, he caught a glimpse of what looked like a human figure standing waist-deep in the water. The figure was translucent, like looking through smoky glass, but the outline was unmistakably human. Tall, broad-shouldered, holding what appeared to be a rifle. Then it was gone again. "Did anyone else see that?" he whispered into his comm. "See what, sir?" came Chen's response. Harrison was about to respond when his earpiece crackled with a new voice. It was speaking English, but with an accent he'd never heard before, something ancient and weathered, like the voice of a man who'd seen too many wars. "Navy SEALs, this is Ghost 7. You're in my area of operations. Recommend you hold position and let me finish clearing the hostile base." Harrison's team went dead silent. Ghost 7 wasn't a call sign any of them recognized, and their mission briefing had been clear. No other friendly forces in the area. "Unknown station, this is Trident 6. Identify yourself and your unit," Harrison replied using his own mission call sign. A dry chuckle came through the comm. "My unit dissolved about 60 years ago, son. But the mission continues." Another shot rang out, and Harrison watched in amazement as another Krillian dropped. The aliens were now in full panic mode, firing randomly into the darkness and calling for reinforcements. "Ghost 7, how are you accessing our communication frequency?" Harrison demanded. "Military encryption hasn't changed as much as you'd think. Besides, I've been monitoring your approach for the past 6 hours. You boys are good, but you're not exactly subtle." Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold river water soaking through his uniform. 6 hours ago, they'd been rappelling from helicopters 20 kilometers away. No way anyone could have been tracking them from the start. "Sir, we've got incoming," Williams whispered urgently. "Krillian reinforcements approaching from the north. 3 transports, approximately 30 hostiles." Harrison swore under his breath. Their mission had just gone from intelligence gathering to survival. With Krillian reinforcements closing in, they'd be outnumbered 3-1, and their extraction point was still 5 kilometers away. "Ghost 7, if you're really out there, we could use some assistance," he said into his comm. "Already on it, Commander. Your boys might want to get comfortable. This is going to take a while." What happened next defied everything Harrison thought he knew about warfare. The invisible shooter, Ghost 7, began engaging the incoming Krillian transports while they were still airborne. His shots were impossibly precise, targeting the aircraft's engines and weapon systems with surgical accuracy. The first transport went down in a controlled crash, its engines disabled, but the craft still intact enough that the crew inside would survive. The second lost its weapon pods and had to make an emergency landing. The third turned around and fled. "Whoever you are, that was some damn fine shooting," Rodriguez whispered. "Appreciate it, Marine. Been doing this for a while." "Navy," Rodriguez corrected automatically. "Right, Navy. You boys all look the same to me in those fancy uniforms." Harrison was trying to process what he was seeing. The shooter was engaging targets at ranges that should have been impossible with conventional weapons, especially while somehow remaining invisible. But more than that, his tactical knowledge was flawless. He wasn't just eliminating threats, he was controlling the entire battlefield. "Ghost 7, what's your status? Do you need extraction?" Another chuckle came through the comm. "Negative, Commander. I've got my own way out. But you boys need to move. You've got about 10 minutes before the next wave arrives, and this bunch won't be as easy to discourage." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been fighting these particular Krillians for longer than you've been alive, son. They're persistent." I'll give them that. Harrison's mind was spinning. The Krillians had only made first contact with humanity 15 years ago. Before that, they'd been completely unknown to human intelligence. That's impossible. First official contact, Ghost 7 corrected. Some of us have been keeping tabs on the neighbors for a lot longer than that. Through his scope, Harrison watched as the few remaining Krillian sentries abandoned their posts and retreated deeper into the base. The compound that had been heavily fortified 15 minutes ago was now effectively neutralized by a single shooter. "All right, Trident team, let's move in and complete our mission," Harrison ordered. "Ghost 7, will you be providing overwatch?" "Negative. My work here is done." "But Commander?" "Yes?" "Tell your intelligence people they need to dig deeper into their historical files. The Krillians aren't new to this sector. They're just new to being noticed." "Wait, what do you mean by that?" Static filled Harrison's earpiece for several seconds. When the line cleared, the voice that came through was different somehow. More distant, like someone speaking from very far away. "Check the records from the Vietnam War, son. Look for reports of impossible sniper activity in the Mekong Delta. Look for stories about ghosts in the water." "Ghost 7, please clarify." But the comm line went dead. Harrison stared at the water where he'd seen the translucent figure. The river flowed peacefully, giving no sign that anything unusual had happened. But the evidence was all around them. A fortified alien base neutralized by a phantom sniper who seemed to know more about their enemies than their own intelligence services. "Sir, should we investigate that position?" Williams asked. Harrison considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "Negative. We've got a mission to complete and limited time to do it. But Williams?" "Yes, sir?" "When we get back to base, I want you to start researching everything you can find about unexplained sniper activity in military history." Something 3 weeks after the mission, Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison sat in a cramped basement office at Naval Intelligence Headquarters, surrounded by towers of classified files that officially didn't exist. The overhead lights flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across decades-old photographs and after-action reports. Staff Sergeant Williams looked up from his computer terminal, his face pale in the blue glow of the screen. "Commander, you need to see this." Harrison walked over to Williams's workstation, where dozens of military reports were scattered across multiple monitors. Each file was marked with red classification stamps and bore the telltale signs of having been buried deep in the archives. "I started where Ghost 7 suggested, Vietnam War sniper reports. But, sir, this goes way back further than that." Williams pulled up a scanned document dated 1943. "Battle of Guadalcanal. Marine sniper reported engaging Japanese positions from an impossible angle. Multiple witnesses claimed the shots came from open water, but no boat or swimmer was ever spotted." Harrison leaned closer to read the faded text. The report described a single marksman who had eliminated an entire Japanese machine gun nest from what appeared to be the middle of a lagoon. The Marines who witnessed it swore the shots came from empty water, but their commanding officer had dismissed it as combat stress and poor visibility. "Keep going," Harrison said. Williams clicked to another file. Korean War, 1951. Army Rangers reported sniper support during the retreat from Seoul. Again, shots coming from impossible positions. This time, the sniper was supposedly firing from inside a frozen river. The pattern was becoming clear. Every major conflict involving American forces had reports of phantom snipers, always near water. Always appearing when conventional forces were outgunned or in desperate situations, and always dismissed by higher command as battlefield hallucinations or classified so deep that most people forgot they existed. "Sir, the really weird part is the consistency of the accounts," Williams continued, pulling up photograph after photograph. "Different wars, different decades, but the descriptions are almost identical. Tall figure, translucent, carrying what appears to be a modified sniper rifle, and they all mention the same thing. Which is? The voice. Everyone who made radio contact describes the same accent. Old-fashioned American, but with something else underneath. Like someone who learned English a long time ago but isn't originally from anywhere specific. Harrison felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. That matched exactly what he'd heard from Ghost 7 during the Krillian mission. His secure phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed Admiral Patricia Chen, Director of Naval Special Operations. "Harrison, my office. Now, and bring whatever files you've been digging through." 20 minutes later, Harrison and Williams sat across from Admiral Chen in her spotless office overlooking the Potomac River. Chen was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much classified information. She'd been in special operations for 30 years, which meant she had security clearances that most people couldn't even pronounce. "Gentlemen, what you've stumbled onto is one of the most classified programs in military history," she began without preamble. Project Lazarus was initiated in 1943, shortly after the first Phantom sniper reports came in from the Pacific Theater. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The first image showed a laboratory from the 1940s, filled with equipment that looked decades ahead of its time. The initial theory was that we were dealing with enemy super soldiers, advanced camouflage perhaps, or some kind of new technology. But when our people started analyzing the ballistics data, they realized something impossible was happening. The display shifted to show bullet trajectory analysis. Harrison stared at the data, not believing what he was seeing. "The shots were coming from positions that didn't exist," Admiral Chen continued. "Not just concealed positions, but actual empty space. Water, air, sometimes even solid rock. The physics didn't work." "What was the conclusion?" Harrison asked. "That we weren't dealing with enemy soldiers at all. We were dealing with something else entirely." Chen pulled up another document. The breakthrough came when a Navy cryptographer noticed patterns in the radio communications. The Phantom snipers weren't using standard military frequencies. They were using something much older. The hologram displayed a complex waveform analysis. The signals were coming through on frequencies that had been abandoned by the military decades earlier, frequencies that had been used by units that were officially listed as killed in action. Williams leaned forward. "You're saying these are dead soldiers?" "That was the initial hypothesis, but it gets stranger." Chen activated another display showing a world map covered in red dots. "Every appearance of Phantom sniper activity corresponds exactly with locations where American forces had previously suffered massive casualties in water-related incidents. Guadalcanal, where an entire marine company was lost crossing a river under fire. The Mekong Delta, where Navy SEALs disappeared during underwater demolition missions. The list goes on." Harrison studied the map. "So what are they? Ghosts?" "We don't use that term in official reports," Chen replied. "The current classification is temporal military assets, or TMAs. But yes, that's essentially what we're dealing with. Soldiers who died in the line of duty but somehow continued to serve." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Harrison had always been skeptical of supernatural explanations, but the evidence was overwhelming. "Admiral, how many of these TMAs are there?" "We estimate between 30 and 40 active units worldwide. They seem to appear whenever American forces are facing overwhelming odds, particularly in situations involving water or amphibious operations." Chen pulled up another file, this one marked with security classifications Harrison didn't recognize. "Project Lazarus has been studying them for 80 years. We've learned a few things. First, they're definitely our people. DNA analysis of spent casings and other evidence confirms they're genetically American military personnel. Second, they retain all their military training and tactical knowledge. Third, They seem to have access to information and capabilities far beyond what they possessed in life. Like what? Impossible accuracy, the ability to appear and disappear at will, and most importantly, knowledge of enemy activities that our conventional intelligence can't match. Chen's expression grew serious. Harrison, your Ghost 7 knew about the Krillians long before first contact. The TMAs have been tracking alien activity in our sector for decades. Harrison felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. How is that possible? We think death changes their perspective somehow. Time, space, the normal limitations of physical existence, none of it seems to apply to them anymore. They exist in a state where they can perceive threats to America across multiple time streams and dimensions. Williams had been silent during most of the briefing, but now he spoke up. Admiral, if these TMAs have been protecting us for 80 years, why is this the first most people are hearing about it? Chen smiled grimly. Because they don't want to be known. Every time we've tried to make formal contact or study them more closely, they disappear. The only communication they maintain is tactical coordination during active combat operations. The holographic display showed surveillance footage from various conflicts over the decades. In each case, the TMAs appeared just long enough to neutralize critical threats, then vanished completely. However, Chen continued, recent events have changed things. The Krillian conflict is escalating, and our intelligence suggests they're not the only hostile alien species out there. The TMAs have been trying to send us a message. She activated a new display showing communication intercepts from the past 6 months. We've been receiving coded transmissions on those old military frequencies. The messages are always the same. The deep threats are awakening. Conventional forces will not be sufficient. Authorization requested for full disclosure. Harrison stared at the communications data. They're asking permission to reveal themselves? More than that, they're requesting permission to train living soldiers in their enhanced capabilities, to create a new generation of warriors who can fight the kinds of threats that normal human forces can't handle. The weight of what Admiral Chen was saying hit Harrison like a physical blow. The Phantom snipers weren't just protecting America. They were trying to prepare humanity for something much larger and more dangerous than the Krillian border conflicts. What kind of threats are we talking about? Chen pulled up a final set of files. These were marked with classifications Harrison had never seen before, security levels that apparently existed above top secret. The images showed star charts with sections marked in red, indicating zones of confirmed hostile alien activity. According to TMA intelligence, the Krillians are just the advanced scouts. There are species out there that make them look like children playing with toys. Civilizations that have been expanding across the galaxy for thousands of years. And they're finally turning their attention to this sector. Harrison studied the star charts. The red zones formed a pattern that seemed to be converging on Earth's local star group. The TMAs believe we have maybe 5 years before the first wave of serious threats arrives. Species with technology so advanced that our current military capabilities would be useless against them. Williams asked the question Harrison was afraid to voice. What exactly are they proposing? A joint training program. Selected personnel from special operations units would work directly with TMAs to learn enhanced combat techniques. The soldiers wouldn't become TMAs themselves, but they'd gain some of their capabilities. Improved accuracy, tactical awareness, the ability to operate in environments that would normally be lethal. Chen paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Essentially, they want to create super soldiers. Living warriors with some of the advantages of being dead. The room fell silent again. Harrison found himself thinking about Ghost 7's impossible accuracy, his knowledge of enemy movements, his ability to appear and disappear at will. If even a fraction of those abilities could be transferred to living soldiers, it would revolutionize warfare. Admiral, what's the downside? We don't know. The TMAs have been deliberately vague about the specific training methods they want to use. All we know is that it would involve something they call threshold conditioning, a process that would fundamentally change the trainees at a molecular level. Harrison felt ice forming in his stomach again. Change them how? Unknown. The TMAs claim the changes would be beneficial and reversible, but we have no way to verify that. We'd essentially be trusting the word of soldiers who've been dead for decades. Chen deactivated the holographic display and leaned back in her chair. Command wants you to make the decision, Harrison. Your team had the most recent contact with the TMA, and your report was the most detailed we've received. If you recommend moving forward with the program, we'll authorize it. If you have reservations, we'll continue with conventional preparations for the coming threats. Harrison looked at Williams, who was staring at the now empty space where the hologram had been. The weight of the decision was staggering. They were being asked to trust their lives and possibly their humanity to soldiers who existed in a state that defied all scientific understanding. But he kept thinking about Ghost 7's voice, calm and professional even in the middle of an impossible situation. Whatever these TMAs were, they had been protecting American forces for 80 years without asking for anything in return. They could have revealed themselves at any time, could have demanded recognition or resources. Instead, they had operated in complete secrecy, appearing only when needed and disappearing as soon as the immediate threat was neutralized. Admiral, I need to know one more thing. In all your research and all the encounters with TMAs over the decades, have any of them ever acted against American interests? Chen shook her head. Never. Not once. Every action they've taken has been in defense of American forces or American civilians. They've had countless opportunities to cause harm or pursue their own agendas, but they've consistently acted as loyal soldiers. Harrison made his decision. Then I recommend we move forward with the program, but with conditions. Which are: first, complete transparency about the training methods. We need to know exactly what threshold conditioning involves. Second, the right to withdraw any trainee from the program if adverse effects are observed. Third, ongoing medical monitoring of all participants. Chen nodded. Acceptable. The TMAs will be contacted with your conditions. If they agree, training will begin within the week. As Harrison and Williams left the Admiral's office, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a threshold that humanity was never meant to cross. But with alien threats gathering in the darkness between stars, maybe crossing impossible lines was exactly what humanity needed to do. The war was coming, and the living of the training facility existed in a place that didn't appear on any map. Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison stood waist-deep in a pool of water that seemed to glow with its own internal light, surrounded by equipment that defied every law of physics he thought he understood. The first thing you need to understand, Ghost 7 said, his translucent form becoming slightly more solid as he spoke, is that consciousness isn't bound by the same rules as physical matter. Your body is just one expression of who you are. There are others. Around the pool, 11 other Navy SEALs stood in similar states of concentration. They'd been training for 6 days now, and Harrison was beginning to understand why the TMAs had been reluctant to explain their methods. Threshold conditioning wasn't just military training. It was a fundamental rewiring of human awareness. Focus on the boundary between yourself and the water, Ghost 7 continued. Feel where you end and not you begins. Then ask yourself why that boundary has to exist. Harrison closed his eyes and tried to follow the instruction. At first, he felt nothing unusual. Water was water. His body was his body. But as minutes passed, something began to shift. The distinction between the water surrounding him and his own consciousness started to blur. Good! Ghost 7's voice seemed to come from inside Harrison's head now. Now, extend that awareness outward. The water you're standing in connects to every body of water on Earth. Through quantum entanglement, it connects to every body of water in the universe. Suddenly, Harrison could feel it. The vast network of water that covered his planet, the ice caps and deep oceans, the rivers and underground streams. And beyond that, impossibly, he could sense the alien oceans of distant worlds where humanity had never set foot. What you're experiencing, Ghost 7 explained, is what happens when consciousness stops accepting artificial limitations. Death taught us this lesson by force. You're learning it while still alive. Petty Officer Rodriguez gasped and opened his eyes. Sir, I can see the Krillian fleet. They're moving toward the Tau Ceti system, 47 ships carrying some kind of new weapon. Harrison's eyes snapped open. Rodriguez was still standing in the training pool, but his gaze was focused on something infinitely distant. That's 3 star systems away, Williams said incredulously. Distance is a physical concept, Ghost 7 replied. Consciousness operates by different rules. Rodriguez is perceiving quantum information transmitted through water molecules that exist in both locations simultaneously. Harrison felt his understanding of reality reshaping itself. The TMAs weren't just enhanced soldiers, they were operating on a completely different level of existence, and somehow they were teaching living humans to access that same level. How far does this awareness extend? Harrison asked. As far as you allow it to, but be warned, the deeper you go, the more you'll see, and some of what you'll see isn't pleasant. As if triggered by Ghost 7's words, Harrison's expanded awareness suddenly detected something that made his blood freeze. Dark shapes moving through the void between galaxies, vast intelligences that viewed biological life as nothing more than interesting chemistry experiments. The Devourers, Ghost 7 said grimly. They've been traveling toward this galaxy for 2 million years. What you're sensing is their advanced scout force, only about 50,000 years out now. 50,000 years? Williams asked. That's practically next door in cosmic terms. Which is why we need to accelerate your training. The Krillians and their allies are small threats compared to what's coming. Humanity needs to be ready to fight on a level most species never achieve. Over the next 3 hours, Harrison's team learned to extend their consciousness across vast distances, to perceive threats and opportunities that existed beyond normal sensory range. But the real breakthrough came when Ghost 7 began teaching them to manipulate physical matter through focused intention. Your rifle, Ghost 7 said, gesturing to Harrison's weapon. You think of it as a separate object, but at the quantum level, everything is connected. The rifle, the bullet, your target. They're all expressions of the same underlying field of possibility. Harrison picked up his rifle and aimed at a target 500 meters away. But instead of relying purely on physical mechanics, he tried to extend his awareness along the path the bullet would take. Suddenly, he could perceive every air current, every minute variation in temperature and humidity. More than that, he could sense the molecular structure of both the bullet and the target. With a slight shift in consciousness, he found he could influence both. The shot was perfect. Not just accurate, it was impossible. The bullet curved in mid-flight, compensating for wind and gravitational variations that Harrison couldn't have calculated with any computer. Excellent, Ghost 7 said. Now try it at a greater range. He gestured, and a new target appeared on Harrison's enhanced perception. It wasn't visible to normal sight. It was located on the dark side of the moon. That's 250,000 miles away, Harrison protested. Distance is an illusion. Aim for what you can perceive, not what your eyes can see. Harrison steadied his rifle, extending his consciousness across the vast emptiness of space. To his amazement, he could actually sense the target. A small metal disc placed there by some previous TMA exercise. The shot was impossible by every standard of physics, but his enhanced awareness made it feel natural. The bullet left the barrel and immediately transcended normal ballistic limitations. It didn't follow a parabolic trajectory. It moved through space along the path of Harrison's consciousness, arriving at the lunar target 3 seconds later. "How is this possible?" Harrison asked, his scientific mind reeling. "Consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level," Ghost 7 explained. "Most beings never learn to access this capability because they die before reaching the necessary level of awareness. The TMAs learned it by accident. Death forced us into a state where consciousness could operate independently of physical limitations." Rodriguez suddenly stiffened, his enhanced awareness detecting something new. "Contact incoming. Multiple alien signatures approaching Earth." The training pool suddenly filled with other translucent figures, dozens of TMAs materializing from across the decades. Harrison recognized uniforms from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and conflicts he couldn't immediately identify. "Gentlemen," Ghost 7 announced, "your final exam has arrived ahead of schedule." Through their enhanced perception, Harrison's team could see the approaching threat. It wasn't Krillian. This was something else entirely. 5 massive ships, each one the size of a city, emerging from hyperspace beyond Pluto's orbit. Their technology was so advanced that they barely registered as physical objects. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that Harrison couldn't fully comprehend. "The architects," one of the older TMAs said, his uniform bearing the markings of a Civil War-era sniper. "We've been tracking them for over a century. They're the species that creates other species as tools for galactic conquest. The Krillians are just one of their recent projects." Harrison felt the full weight of the situation crashing down on him. Humanity wasn't just facing one alien threat, they were facing the galactic equivalent of a cosmic engineering project, designed specifically to test and eliminate any species that might pose a threat to the Architect's expansion. "What are our options?" he asked. "Conventional military response would be useless," Ghost 7 replied. "The Architects exist partially outside normal spacetime. You can't destroy them with normal weapons any more than you could destroy a shadow by shooting at it. But enhanced consciousness can reach them. Enhanced consciousness can reach anything. The question is whether you're ready to operate at that level permanently." Harrison looked around at his team. They'd all achieved remarkable breakthroughs in the past week, but what Ghost 7 was suggesting was something far beyond anything they'd attempted. "What do you mean, permanently?" "To fight the Architects effectively, you'll need to transition to our level of existence. Not death, but something similar. A state where your consciousness operates independently of your physical body." The implications hit Harrison immediately. They were being asked to sacrifice their normal human existence to become something beyond human limitations. "Is there a way back?" "Unknown. We've never had anyone make the transition voluntarily while still alive." Harrison thought about his family, his life outside the military, all the normal human experiences he'd be giving up. Then he thought about the billions of people who would die if the Architects succeeded in their testing protocol. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. One by one, his team members made the same decision. They were Navy SEALs. They'd sworn to protect America and humanity, regardless of personal cost. "Then let's begin," Ghost 7 said. The training pool suddenly filled with energy that Harrison could feel at a cellular level. The boundaries between his individual consciousness and the larger quantum field began to dissolve completely. For a terrifying moment, he felt like he was losing himself entirely. Then something clicked into place, and Harrison found himself existing in a state he'd never imagined possible. His body was still there, but it was just one expression of his consciousness. He could perceive reality across multiple dimensions simultaneously, could influence matter and energy through focused intention, could exist anywhere in the universe simply by directing his awareness there. "Welcome to the real war," Ghost 7 said, and Harrison realized they were now communicating directly through consciousness rather than speech. Harrison extended his awareness toward the approaching architect ships and finally understood the true scope of what they were facing. The ships weren't just vehicles, they were alive, vast intelligences that had been reshaping galactic civilization for millions of years. They saw biological species as temporary inconveniences, interesting enough to study but ultimately disposable. But they had made one critical error. They had assumed that biological consciousness was permanently limited by biological constraints. They had never encountered a species that could transcend those limitations while still retaining their essential nature. Harrison and his team, along with the accumulated TMAs from decades of conflict, represented something entirely new in galactic history. They were biological consciousness operating at post-biological levels of capability, retaining human values and determination while gaining access to cosmic-scale power. The battle that followed couldn't be described in conventional military terms. Harrison found himself engaging the architect ships across multiple dimensions simultaneously, using enhanced consciousness to disrupt their reality manipulation systems. His team operated as a coordinated unit, their awareness linked at a fundamental level, sharing perceptions and capabilities in real time. The architects, for the first time in their million-year expansion, encountered resistance they couldn't simply overwhelm or outsmart. Human consciousness, enhanced by the TMA's hard-learned lessons, proved to be uniquely adaptable and persistent. Where other species had tried to match the architect's technology, humans transcended the need for technology entirely. The engagement lasted 17 minutes and 43 seconds by Earth clocks, but Harrison experienced it as both an instant and an eternity. When it was over, the architect ships were retreating toward deep space, their testing protocol abandoned. Impossible, one of the architect intelligences transmitted as they withdrew. Biological consciousness cannot achieve trans-dimensional stability. Human consciousness can, Harrison replied, his enhanced awareness reaching across the light years. We don't accept limitations the way other species do. In the aftermath, as Harrison's team slowly adjusted to their new existence, Ghost 7 materialized beside them in the training facility. "Congratulations," he said. "You're the first living beings to successfully make the transition to enhanced consciousness. You're also probably the last humans who will need to do so." "What do you mean?" Harrison asked. "The architects will spread word of what happened here. Other hostile species will reconsider their expansion plans in this direction. And more importantly, humanity now has protectors who exist on the same level as any cosmic threat." Harrison looked around at his team, still adjusting to their expanded awareness. They were still human in all the ways that mattered. Their values, their loyalty, their determination to protect innocent life, but they now had the capability to operate on a cosmic scale. "So what's next?" Rodriguez asked. Ghost 7 smiled, and for the first time since Harrison had met him, the TMA looked genuinely happy. "Next, you teach others. Not everyone will need to make the full transition, but every human should have access to at least basic enhanced awareness. Because this was just the first test." Harrison extended his consciousness outward, scanning the galaxy for other potential threats. What he found was both sobering and exhilarating. There were hostile species out there, ancient civilizations that viewed younger races as obstacles or resources. But there were also peaceful species struggling to survive, civilizations that could benefit from the kind of protection humanity could now provide. For the first time in galactic history, biological consciousness had transcended its apparent limitations while retaining its essential nature. Humanity had not just survived its cosmic trial, they had evolved into something that could stand guardian over biological life throughout the galaxy. The age of purely physical warfare was ending. The age of consciousness as a weapon and shield had begun, and at its center stood humanity, still recognizably human but no longer bound by human limitations. The universe had tested them and found them worthy of the challenge. Now it was humanity's turn to do the testing. Would need to learn from the dead if they hope to survive it. G tells me this Ghost 7 isn't the first impossible shooter our people have encountered. As his team moved into the now-abandoned Krillian base, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just witnessed something that would change everything. The official reports would focus on the intelligence they gathered about Krillian plasma weapons, but the real discovery was something else entirely. Somewhere in the shadows of human military history, there were others like Ghost 7. Soldiers who had transcended normal limitations, who continued their mission long after their official service ended. And if the aliens thought they were dealing with ordinary human forces, they were in for a very unpleasant surprise. The river flowed silently behind them, keeping its secrets for now. But Harrison had a feeling that before this war was over, those secrets would surface again.